Hi, welcome back to the fifth module on grouping in SQL. At this point, I believe you've gone through the sorting in SQL video and you've been able to try out these queries by running them using SQLite. All right, so in this particular video, my focus is to explain this grouping in SQL. So, what does grouping means and how is it applied? Already, we've seen some application of grouping in SQL in the third module when we discussed aggregation in SQL. Remember in this module, I said for you to perform any aggregation or compute a summary statistic like the counts, the sum, the averages, the minimum, maximum, and so on. These aggregations are accompanying with the group by clause. All right, just as displayed in this syntax, you have to accompanying the aggregation function with the group by clause. You can't aggregate in SQL without grouping by. All right. So having said that, although we mentioned it briefly in this module, but is strong attention wasn't paid to it. Now in this video, my focus is to explain further how the group by function works and how the group by clause works and how the importance of the group by clause. So in SQL, grouping is a powerful feature that allows you to aggregate data just like we've seen during the aggregation in SQL module based on specific columns, creating summary results for each distinct value in those columns. By using the group by clause in conjunction with aggregate functions, you can transform large data sets into meaningful insights and analysis or an analyze, right? Grouping is especially useful for creating reports and performing data analysis on a more granular level. So below is the basic syntax of group by clause. The group by clause comes in this format. You definitely begin with the select clause. You're selecting a column of interest and then you perform aggregate function by choosing a column you want to aggregate, say column 2, and you have to identify or choose the name of table from which these columns are picked from. Then you apply the group by function on the column you want to perform the aggregation or the aggregate on. So this is the basic syntax of how the group by function is executed. So let's break down this particular query. In the syntax, this syntax above, column 1 represents the column by which you want to group the data, right? Column 1 is the column by which I want to group the data, just as seen here. An aggregate underscore function is any aggregate function like count, sum, average, minimum, maximum, and so on that will perform calculations within each group. Okay, so we shall look at some examples of group by function by querying our Chinook database. So let's explore some examples querying using the Chinook database to demonstrate grouping. So the first task that I would like us to execute using by this example or from our database is to count the number of tracks for each album. We want to count the number of tracks for each album. So let's perform that. Let's go ahead and write the query. Let me just copy the tags, what we're about to do. I'll head over to DB browser for SQLite. All right, so this is the sorting tab. We're done with aggregation sorting. Now I'd like to insert a new tab for grouping. Let's rename tab as grouping. Okay, so the task we want to execute right now is the counting, we want to count the number of tracks for each album. All right, so let's display the table of interest. I'm going to select all columns from the um of the tracks table. Let's begin with the tracks table. All right, when you run this query, we have the track ID, the name of the track, the album ID, the media type, the genre ID, composer, milliseconds, bytes, and unit price. So displaying the number of tracks for each album would mean that I want to, now if you check this, we have track ID and album ID all in this single table. So what this means is that for any track, any track whose, you know, any track that is under ID1, album ID1, simply means that the track is in the first album one. So let's see all the track in ID in album one. So this track is in album one. This same track is in album two. This track is in album three. This I mean album one. I mean to say. So this is the first track. Let's say according to the way it's listed on the table, the first track in album one. This is the second track in album one. The third track in album one. The fourth track. So all of these are in album one. So the first these three tracks are all in album three, right? And this track is in album two. So for us to know how many tracks are there in each album, what we need to do is to count the either the track name or the track ID, and then we display those, or we perform the count according to the number of uh each track in the album. So we're going to group by. So the grouping by here means that I'm going to group. I'll check how many unique or distinct number of ID are there. I mean number of album ID are there. Then count each number of ID. So this is one way to look at it. I can decide to display album. So I want to pick album, right? I mean album ID. So I'm picking album ID, and not just picking album ID. I'm also going to do a count of this album ID, right? A count of the same album ID. So I want to display the album ID and do a count of it, right? And this album ID is, of course, from the tracks table. So this count will be done based on the group by or grouping of the album. Okay, so this is what I want to do. Let's see how this result will turn out. So here I want to display the album ID and alongside the count of the album ID. And this count is being done by grouping the same album ID. So let's run this query. Let me just end the query by putting a semicolon, and then I'm going to run the query to see the result. So now here is our output. So what this is telling us is that there are 10 album ID displayed in the tracks table. 10 album ID 1. So when you go through the entire table, you will see 10 of album ID 1. And why we have that is because there are 10 tracks. That is what it means. That we will find 10 tracks in the first album ID. I mean, album ID 1 has 10 tracks. Album ID 2 has just a single track. Album ID 3 has 3 tracks. Album ID 4 has 8 tracks. Album ID 5 has 15 tracks. So with what this query had done is to simply count the number of tracks for each album. Okay? Now let's go over to the classroom again and see how the syntax is written there. So you can see that we did a selection of the album ID, and then we counted all as the number of tracks or num tracks, and we picked from tracks and grouped by tracks. So and then we also did some kind of ordering. by the number of tracks. So this is even looking more complicated because we are choosing all, right? Okay, it doesn't look complicated actually. So it's just that we chose all. So the difference between this query that is in the classroom and the one I have written is just selecting a particular ID to perform my account on. So if I decide to go ahead and change this to asterisk, that means calculating all, and run this query again, you see we have the same output. Okay, nothing has changed here. So I'm just selecting the album ID and performing the count of all, and then the group by is done on the album ID. So if if you want to use asterisk to select any column by which you want to count, or you select a particular column you want to count with, that will give you the same output. So let's use our alias. Instead of having count album ID, we want to display it as um, num track. So the num track here means the number of tracks. So when you run your query again, you now have this as album ID and number of tracks. So we have 10 tracks in album ID 1, 1 track in album ID 2, and so on and so forth. If we want to display it in descending order, I want to see from the highest number of, the album ID with the highest number of tracks. From that point going forward, we can then add the order by clause. So order by num of track in descending order. So we run this query again to see the output, and here we go. We have this track ID 141 has 57 tracks. Album ID 141 has 57 tracks, which is quite a number of tracks in that album. Then album ID 23 has the next highest number of tracks, 34, followed by 30, track ID 72, 73, followed by 26, track ID 229, and so on and so forth. All right, so these are the track IDs of the number of track in each track ID. All right, so that is one way to apply the group by function. So let's go ahead again and look at the next example. So this next example, we want to calculate the total sales for each customer. So let's go ahead and run this query. We take it one step at a time. I'll paste this as a comment. Okay, let's paste this as a comment. So we want to calculate the total sales for each customer, right? So let's first of all select all from our customers table. Customers table. Let's choose the right field, customers. So I'm going to run this query. Yep, so I'm running this query. Select this and click on your run. So this is the all the columns under the customers table, but focus is to choose total sales for each customer. Do we have any record on sales here? So what we have here is just the rep ID. We have the customer's name, and okay, let's see the tables. Let's see the tables so that we know which one to use. So I think the table that will give us sales will be invoices. Invoices is the table that will give us sales. So let's check out invoices, and when you check out invoices, we can run this query to see the columns in invoices. So since we have customer ID, it means we can actually get the total sales for each customer from the invoice table. All right, because we have total here. So this total is the amount of the total sale for each customer. So that means customer with ID 2 purchased this item of total $1.98, and customer ID 4 purchased the item total $3.96, and so on and so forth on this invoice date. So these are the different invoice dates. When you scroll through this data, you would find that some customer ID are repeated. You can see customer ID 2 again. It appeared here and here. We can check out again to see this is customer ID 4 appearing again. Now, these customer IDs appearing multiple times will mean that the customers have purchased here ID 2 again. The customer have purchased items more than one time. So if you want to know the total sales for customer ID 2, for instance, I'll scroll through this table and add up all the total amount I see, the total, the amount under total for each customer ID 2. This is the first one. I'll just pick the 1.98, store it somewhere. Scroll again. When you see customer ID 2, it appeared here again. This is 13.83. Add it to 1.98 and scroll again. When you see customer ID 2, you pick whatever value you have against that customer ID 2 and do the same thing for each customer ID. So to actually evaluate that using SQL syntax or query, you go ahead and choose. So I would like to see the customer ID. So it means I'm selecting customer ID, and then I'll also do a count of the customer ID, or a count of maybe all, which is asterisk. Either you do a count of all or count of customer ID from the invoices table, and the group by here will be performed on the customer's ID. Okay, so when you run this query, it's expected that you see the total. Oh, sorry, I'm not doing a count. I'm doing a count. I'm doing a total sales. So we are going to sum. So I'm summing and not doing a count. So I'll sum the value. So let's go ahead and with this 7 7, it means that each customer ID appeared 7 times on that particular record. Okay, this one appeared twice. Customer ID 56 or 59 rather. Every other customer appeared 7 times. It means they did 7 purchases. Only customer with ID 59 did had 6 purchases. So let's run this query now. After changing the count to sum, highlight the query and hit on the execute button. What's happening? Oh, I have made a mistake. So, but it says near elect, there's an error there. So this is supposed to be select. I don't know why it's not, or didn't I? Since I didn't select all those words. Okay, let's try again. Run this query. Okay. So what's happening? Sum of asterisks. Okay, let's sum. Oh, sorry, I can't sum asterisks. I can sum only the total. So I'm summing the total column. So that was a mistake from my end. So don't forget that there's a column called total. So we are summing the total column. So look at the error. It says wrong number of arguments to sum function. So because I'm giving it all columns, so I'm saying take the sum of all columns. I'm not all the columns are numeric, so we can't do that. You can only apply the sum aggregation function to a specific numeric column, which is, and from that table we have a numeric column there is total. In fact, let's run that again to display that. Select all from invoices. From invoices, when you run this query, let's run this query and then you see why we had an error. So this is it here. You can see this is a date column. This is a string column, string, and then we have total. So total is the only numeric value column here. So it means that if you are performing the sum function, unlike the count that you can choose all, you can do select all for count, okay, which will give you the count of each column or any of the column present. But for the sum function, you have to choose a specific column. So here we are specifically interested in calculating the sum of the total sales. So let's go ahead and run the query, highlight it and click on the button to run the query, and then you will see the sum of the total purchases for each customer, or total sales for each customer. So if you want to know the customer who has the highest total sales or the highest purchases, you have to perform or add your order by clause. So we are ordering by the sum of total. Okay, so because I have not given an alias, that's why I have to call again this function that is above. Let's run this query and see what we get. So as you can see, this has been ordered, accordingly. But if you want to give this column a fancy name, you can just add an alias. So as total sales, let's call it total sales. So as total sales, and we are ordering. So if you are ordering, you have to order it by the alias you've given it. So total sales. So let's run this query again and see how to apply. All right, great. So we have our well-defined column name, total sales. So there is a customer ID column and total sales ID. So with this, you can tell which customer has the highest total sales, followed by the next customer and the next and the next. So in fact, this is not even actually, oh, it's not arranged in ascending in descending order yet. We have to make it as appear in descending order. This is in ascending order. So for us to see the customer with highest total sales, you have to give it the instruction to display in descending order. Let us run the query again. Highlight all and click on run. So we have it displayed in the source. So it means customer ID 6 has the highest purchase in the database, and his purchase is $49.62 followed by $47.60 and so on and so forth, all until you obtain you arrive at customer ID 59, which is the customer with the least sales. Yeah, so this is another way of applying using the group by clause. I believe you're learning, and I believe you are getting everything clearly as we explain this concept. Let's head over to the third example. So here we want to find the average track length for each journal. Average track length. So let's copy this the instruction that's of interest. So I'll go ahead and paste this instruction as a comment. So finding the average track length for each journal. All I need to do again, all from let's select all from our tracks table to see what we got there from track, and let's see that we can see a combination of the way our query would be presented. Run this query, and okay, we have track ID, name, album ID, we have the media type. Of course, since we have the general ID, we can actually find the average of the track length. So the track length is in milliseconds. All right. So going through this particular table, you will see that for general ID, we have general ID 1111 appearing multiple times, general ID 11, general ID 2, 3, 4, 5. So different general ID, they are appearing there multiple times. We want to see the average for each of these general, the average of the length or the track length of each of these genres. So what we do is we go ahead and group this particular record by the general ID and calculate the average of the milliseconds for each general ID. So this is what will happen. I would go ahead and select the general ID. I'll select the general ID, and then perform the average. Let's go ahead and perform the average AVG. That is the average function in SQL. Average of milliseconds, and we're picking that from the tracks table. We are going to perform this average by grouping the general ID, and let's run this query, and then see the outcome. So this is the output of the average of each general ID. All right, as you can see, it's coming in quite a number of decimal places. So one way to reduce the number of decimal places is to use the round function. Let's see the round function. So I'm taking the round of this average in 2 decimal place. So this is how to take the round function, round average milliseconds, comma 2. Let's see the effect of applying the round function into this. So, great, we have been able to round off those decimal places, reduce it to 2 decimal places from the way it was presented earlier. All right, so now that we've performed this, we've been able to calculate the average for each general the average length for each general ID. So we've displayed the results. This is not looking so nice. Let's call it a better name. So we're going to add an alias to it. So we want the column to be displayed as average length. Let's just call it average length, and then we run this query again to see the better title given to that column, called the average of the general ID. All right. Oh, okay. So what's error? Okay, I didn't highlight all the queries again properly. So let ensure you highlight it all the queries and then run again. And now we have an output that makes sense. You can decide to order this again in descending order just to see the general with the highest highest track length. So I'm going to order this by the average length, the average length. Okay, and this ordering will be done in descending order. Okay, let's run this query again to see the output. Great, so we have this now ordered in descending order, and that shows that the general ID with general ID 20 has the the highest average track length, followed by general ID 18, 21, 19, 22, 20, and 3, and so on and so forth. So that is how to perform the using the average aggregate function to perform the average of those general ID and grouping by the general ID itself. All right, so that makes sense. I'd like you to go ahead and execute this last query. Okay, so you want to group customers by country and counting the number of customers in each country. So I'd like you to execute this query and tell me what your output looks like. All right, so this is where we are going to end this video. I'll go ahead and save this project, save the project so that I can come back to it at any time and continue from where I stopped. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you now understand how to perform group by. You now know what a group by clause means in SQL. Keep practicing. Don't stop at what you've done here. Look at your database and practice by querying more and more, applying the group by clause. All right. Thank you once more for watching. I hope and thank you for choosing the Refied Academy. I'll see you again in the next video. Do have a wonderful time. Goodbye.